I want you to understand something. When you're a black woman who built a billion-dollar empire from scratch, you don't get there by being stupid. And you certainly don't let anyone make a fool of you in your own home. My name is Cassandra Bennett. Right now, I'm standing in my backyard with my phone in one hand, and I've just done something that 3 hours ago I never thought I'd do. I've released my 2 Cane Corso guard dogs, Duchess and King, into the yard. And there's a woman screaming outside my bedroom window. A woman who has no business being in my house. A woman who thought she could climb out my second-floor window and escape into the night. But let me back up. Let me tell you how we got here, because this story, it didn't start tonight. It started 15 years ago, when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I married a man who saw me as a bank account with a heartbeat. My life looks perfect from the outside. I'm the CEO and founder of Bennett Digital Solutions, a cybersecurity firm that protects some of the biggest corporations in America. We're worth $2.3 billion. I built that company from nothing. Absolutely nothing. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a neighborhood where most people didn't make it out. My mother, Patricia Washington, we call her Patty, she cleaned office buildings at night and took care of elderly folks during the day just to keep food on our table. She used to tell me, "Baby, your mind is your ticket out of here. Don't waste it." So, I didn't. I got a full scholarship to MIT, studied computer science, and graduated top of my class. While my classmates were partying, I was in the lab, writing code, understanding systems, seeing vulnerabilities that nobody else could see. After graduation, I worked for 3 different tech companies, and at every single one, I watched mediocre men get promoted over me. I watched them take credit for my ideas. I watched them get funding for concepts I'd pitched months earlier. So, at 24 years old, I did what any woman tired of being overlooked would do. I started my own company, Bennett Digital Solutions. I maxed out 4 credit cards, borrowed money from my mother, even though she barely had any to give, and I worked out of a tiny apartment in Atlanta for 2 years straight. Some nights I'd sleep under my desk because I was too exhausted to drive home. But I believed in what I was building. I knew that companies needed better cybersecurity. I knew I could provide it. And I was right. Within 5 years, I landed my first major contract with a Fortune 500 company. Within 10 years, I had offices in 12 cities. Within 15 years, I was a billionaire. The same men who'd overlooked me were now asking me for advice, for investments, for opportunities. That's when I met Derek Bennett.
God, he was fine.
Tall, smooth dark skin, smile that could light up a room. He was an investment banker at one of those firms in Buckhead, the kind of place where they wore custom suits and talked about market trends over 18-year-old scotch. We met at a charity gala, one of those events where Atlanta's black elite gathered to write checks and network. Derek approached me at the bar, confident, charming. He said he'd been following my company's growth and was impressed. He asked intelligent questions about my business model, my expansion plans. He didn't treat me like a novelty. He treated me like an equal. We dated for 2 years. He was attentive, romantic, supportive. When I had to fly to San Francisco for a week to close a deal, he'd send flowers to my hotel every day. When I was stressed about a potential investor backing out, he'd cook dinner and rub my shoulders and tell me everything would work out. My mother liked him, which was saying something because Patty didn't like anybody I dated. She'd always find something wrong.
Too lazy.
Too arrogant. Too broke. But with Derek, she seemed almost relieved. She'd say, "Finally, baby, you found a man who can match your energy." So when Derek proposed on my 37th birthday, on a private beach in Turks and Caicos with a 5-carat diamond ring, I said yes, without hesitation. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. My daughter Kenya was born a year after that. Everything seemed perfect. But here's what I didn't see. Here's what I was too busy building an empire to notice. Derek wasn't matching my energy. He was feeding off of it. About a year into our marriage, Derek started talking about how stressful his job was. How the banking world was cutthroat and exhausting. How he missed spending time with me because we were both working such long hours. He suggested that maybe, since my company was doing so well, he could step back from his career. He could manage our household, be more present for Kenya, support me by handling all the personal logistics so I could focus on growing the business. At the time, it made sense. I was traveling constantly. Meetings in New York, conferences in London, pitches in Dubai. Having someone manage our home life, coordinate with Kenya's school, handle the staff, plan our social calendar, it sounded like a blessing. So Derek quit his job. And for the first few years, it was great. He'd handle everything. Doctor's appointments for Kenya, maintenance on our cars, organizing our anniversary trips. I could focus entirely on my company without worrying about the details of daily life. But slowly, things changed. Derek started spending more money. Not just normal expenses, but extravagant purchases. A $70,000 watch. A custom motorcycle he rode twice. A membership to an exclusive golf club where the initiation fee alone was $100,000. When I questioned him about it, he'd get defensive. He'd say that he'd given up his career for me, that he deserved to enjoy the fruits of our success, that I was being controlling. Our success. That phrase always bothered me, because it wasn't our success. It was my company, my 18-hour days, my risks, my vision. But I let it go. I didn't want to be that woman who threw her money in her husband's face. My mother raised me to believe that marriage was a partnership. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. So I stayed quiet. Over the years, Derek became more distant, more entitled. He'd complain about having to attend my business events, said they were boring. He stopped asking about my day, stopped celebrating my wins. When we closed a deal that expanded our company into the European market, worth $300 million, Derek's response was to ask if this meant we could finally buy a yacht. Not congratulations. Not I'm proud of you. Just can we buy a yacht? Our daughter Kenya, she's 14 now, brilliant just like her grandmother and her mama. She's at Le Rosy, this prestigious boarding school in Switzerland. Costs $130,000 a year. Derek's idea. He said she needed to be around other children of wealth and influence. I wanted her at a good school in Atlanta, close to home, close to her grandmother, but Derek insisted. Said I was being overprotective. Said I was holding her back because of my own humble beginnings. That cut deep. But I gave in. And now my baby is 5,000 miles away, and I see her maybe 4 times a year. My mother, Patty, she never said I told you so, but I could see it in her eyes every time Derek did something that disappointed me. She'd warned me from the beginning. About 3 years into my marriage, we were having lunch at her house, just the two of us, and she'd grabbed my hand across the table and said, "Baby, I love you, so I'm gonna say this once. That man loves your money more than he loves you." I'd pulled my hand away, offended, defensive. I told her she didn't know Derek like I did, that he'd sacrificed his career for our family, that she was being judgmental. She just nodded slowly and said, "All right, baby. I hope I'm wrong. I really do." She wasn't wrong. 3 months ago, I started noticing changes in Derek. Little things at first. He bought a new cologne. Tom Ford Oud Wood. Expensive, sensual. Not the fresh, clean scent he'd worn for years. He started going to the gym, every day. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for a healthy lifestyle, but this was different. This was obsessive. 2 hours a day, sometimes more. He'd come home pumped up, flexing in the mirror, taking selfies. At 45 years old, Derek was suddenly concerned about his appearance in a way he'd never been before. Then there were the phone calls. He'd get a call and immediately leave the room. Or he'd be texting and smiling at his phone, and when I'd walk up, he'd quickly lock the screen. When I asked who he was talking to, he'd say it was just his boys, planning a golf trip. But something felt off. A wife knows. That instinct in your gut that tells you something's wrong even when you can't prove it yet. Last week, I found the second phone. Derek had taken my car to get detailed because his was in the shop. When I went to pick it up from the service center, I found a phone wedged between the seat and the center console. An iPhone in a plain black case. It wasn't mine. It wasn't our daughter's. It had to be Derek's. I tried to unlock it, but of course, it was password protected. But the notifications were on. And what I saw made my blood run cold. Text messages from someone saved as S with heart emojis. Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was amazing. He makes me feel alive. The timestamps were from nights when I'd been traveling for work. From afternoons when Derek said he was at the gym or playing golf. I wanted to confront him right then. Drive home, throw the phone in his face, demand answers.
But something stopped me.
Maybe it was my business instincts kicking in. In business, you don't make moves based on incomplete information. You gather all the facts first. You plan your strategy. You make sure that when you make your move, it's decisive and it's final. So, I put the phone back exactly where I found it. And I started watching. Really watching. I noticed that Derek's gym sessions coincided with my business trips. That his golf outings lasted 6-7 hours. That he'd started dressing nicer when he went out, even just to run errands. Designer sneakers. Fitted shirts. He'd lost weight. He looked good, I'll give him that. But he wasn't looking good for me. Tonight, I told Derek I had an overnight business trip to New York. A meeting with potential investors that I couldn't miss. He barely looked up from his phone when I told him. Just said, "Okay, have a safe flight." Didn't ask what the meeting was about. Didn't offer to drive me to the airport. Nothing. I packed my overnight bag, called an Uber, and left the house at 4 in the afternoon. But I didn't go to the airport. I went to my office, worked for a couple hours, then at 7 p.m., I drove back toward my neighborhood. I parked my car 3 blocks away from our estate, in a spot where I had a clear view of our security gates. And I waited. I sat there in my Mercedes, in the dark, feeling like a character in a movie I never wanted to be in. Feeling pathetic and angry and heartbroken all at the same time. At 8:45 p.m., a white Range Rover pulled up to our gates. I didn't recognize the vehicle. The driver was a woman. Even from a distance, I could see her long braids, her designer sunglasses, even though it was dark, her confidence as she rolled down her window and spoke to our security guard. And then, my security guard, the one I pay $60,000 a year, opened the gates and let her in. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I watched that Range Rover disappear up our driveway toward my house. The house I built. The house I paid for with money I earned. And in that moment I knew. I knew everything. This wasn't Derek's first time bringing her to our home. This was a routine. My security guard didn't question her, because he'd seen her before. She'd been here multiple times. In my house. In my space. Probably in my bed. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. What would you do if you came home and found out your partner had been bringing someone else into your house? Into the home you built? Would you scream? Would you cry? Would you leave? Drop your answer in the comments, because I need to know I'm not crazy for what I did next. I sat in that car for another hour. I needed to calm down. I needed to think clearly. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. It was late, almost 10 p.m., but Patty answered on the second ring. She always does. I whispered, "Mama, I think Derek's cheating on me. There's a woman in our house right now." There was a long pause. Then my mother's voice, steady and calm like it's always been, said, "Baby, don't do anything crazy. Think about Kenya. Think about your company. Don't let this man make you lose everything you worked for." I said, "Mama, I am thinking about Kenya. I'm thinking about what kind of example I'm setting for my daughter if I let a man disrespect me like this. If I let him bring another woman into my house, and I do nothing."
Patty sighed.
She said, "Then handle your business, baby. But handle it smart. Don't let your emotions make you do something you'll regret." I hung up and sat there for another 20 minutes. Then I sent 3 text messages. The first one was to Vincent Chun, my attorney, and one of my oldest friends. I typed, "Emergency.
Need you on standby.
Will explain soon." The second text was to Julian Cross, my business partner, and the man who'd been by my side since I started my company. Julian and I grew up together on the South Side. He was my first friend at MIT, my first employee, my most trusted advisor. I typed, "You were right about Derek. I need you tomorrow." The third text was to myself, a reminder, stay calm, stay smart, stay in control. Then I started my car and drove through the gates of my own home. I parked in the circular driveway, right behind that white Range Rover. I got out of my car and looked up at my house. Every light was off except for the ones in my bedroom. My bedroom, on the second floor, where my husband was entertaining another woman. I walked to the side entrance, the one that leads directly to my home office. I disabled the interior security alarms from my phone. The system is connected to an app that I designed myself, part of the security infrastructure my company installs for clients. I can control every lock, every camera, every alarm from my phone. Derek didn't know that I'd recently upgraded our system. He had no idea I could see everything. I entered the house quietly. The marble floors in the foyer were cold under my feet. I could hear music playing upstairs. Something slow and sensual. R&B. The kind of music you play when you're trying to set a mood. I could hear laughter. A woman's voice. High-pitched. Young.
Carefree.
She had no idea that the woman who owned this house was standing downstairs, listening to her disrespect everything I'd built. I walked past our family photos in the hallway. Pictures of Derek and me on our wedding day. Pictures of Kenya as a baby. Pictures of family vacations that now felt like lies. 15 years. I'd given this man 15 years of my life. I'd trusted him. I'd built a life with him. And this was how he repaid me. I went to my office and closed the door. I pulled up the security footage on my computer. I have cameras throughout the house, not in the bedrooms or bathrooms, but in every common area, every entrance, every hallway. I scrolled back through the footage from the past 3 months, and what I saw made me want to scream. That white Range Rover had been to my house at least a dozen times. Always when I was traveling. The woman with the braids would arrive around 8 or 9 p.m. and wouldn't leave until the next morning. She'd stay overnight. In my house. Sleeping in my guest rooms. Swimming in my pool. One clip showed her and Derek laughing together in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, drinking champagne. My champagne. The $1,000 bottles I kept for special occasions. Another clip showed her wearing one of my robes. My silk La Perla robe that cost $800. She was walking around my house like she owned it, like she belonged there, like I didn't exist. I saved every clip, downloaded them to an encrypted drive. Evidence. In business, you always need evidence. My hands were shaking as I worked, but I forced myself to stay focused. Emotion is the enemy of strategy. My mother taught me that. My years building a company in a male-dominated industry reinforced it. I looked at the live feed from the upstairs hallway camera. I could see the light under my bedroom door. I could hear the music. And I made a decision. I was going to confront them. But not yet. First, I needed to make sure that when this night was over, Derek would have no option but to leave my house with nothing. I texted Vincent again. How fast can you file divorce papers? He responded within 2 minutes. If you send me everything now, I can have them filed first thing Monday morning. It was Friday night. I sent him every piece of evidence I had. The security footage. The photos I'd taken of the second phone. Screenshots of our bank accounts showing Derek's excessive spending. Everything. Then I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I pulled up our prenuptial agreement. Patty had insisted I get one before marrying Derek. At the time, I'd felt guilty about it, like I was planning for failure before we even started. But Patty had been firm. She'd said, "Baby, protect what you built. Love is beautiful, but legal protection is smart." The prenup was ironclad. If Derek and I divorced, he would get a one-time settlement of $2 million and nothing else. No stake in my company. No ongoing alimony. No claim to any assets acquired before or during the marriage. $2 million. That's it. For 15 years of marriage, Derek would walk away with less than 1% of my net worth. And then I realized something. Derek knew about the prenup. He'd signed it. He knew that divorcing me meant he'd lose access to everything. The house. The cars. The lifestyle. The unlimited credit cards. Everything. That's why he hadn't left. He couldn't leave. He was trapped in a marriage to a woman he clearly didn't love anymore, trapped by his own greed and his unwillingness to go back to working for a living. So instead of leaving, he brought another woman into my house. He was having his cake and eating it too. He got to live like a billionaire while sleeping with whoever he wanted. And I was supposed to just accept it? I was supposed to keep working, keep building, keep funding his lifestyle while he made a fool of me? Not tonight. Tonight it ended. I stood up from my desk and walked toward the back door. I needed to see my dogs. Duchess and King. I'd rescued them 3 years ago from a fighting ring that got busted in South Georgia. They were malnourished, scarred, traumatized. The shelter said they'd probably have to be put down because they were too aggressive. But I saw something in their eyes. Intelligence. Loyalty. A desire to protect. I took them home, hired a professional trainer, worked with them every single day. It took a year, but they transformed. They learned to trust again. They learned that not all humans are cruel. They learned that our home, our property, our family, that was worth protecting. They're Cane Corsos, Italian Mastiffs. Each weighs about 130 pounds of pure muscle. They're not pets. They're guardians. They know every inch of our property. They know me, Derek, Kenya, Lawrence, our butler, and our household staff. Anyone else? Anyone who isn't supposed to be here? They treat them as a threat. I opened the back door and walked to their kennel. Duchess and King immediately stood up, tails wagging. They knew something was different. They could sense my energy. I knelt down and looked at them through the fence. I said, "You protect what's mine, right? You protect our home?" Duchess pressed her massive head against the fence, and I scratched behind her ears. King sat at attention, watching me with those intelligent dark eyes. These dogs loved me. They were loyal to me in a way my husband never was. I pulled out my phone and opened the app that controls their kennel. I have it set up so they can be released remotely if there's ever a security threat. A break-in. An intruder. Tonight there was an intruder in my home. She just happened to have walked through the front door instead of breaking a window. I stood up and took a deep breath. Then I walked back inside and climbed the stairs to my bedroom. Each step felt heavy. Final. I could hear them more clearly now.
Talking.
Laughing. I reached the door and stood there for a moment, my hand on the handle. And then I opened it. The look on Derek's face was something I'll never forget. Pure shock. His mouth fell open. He was sitting on the edge of our bed, shirtless. And next to him, wearing my robe, was a young woman. Beautiful. Brown skin. Long braids. She couldn't have been older than 30. She looked at me with wide eyes, but not shame. Not embarrassment. Annoyance. Like I was interrupting something. Before you find out what happens next, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Because what happened after I walked into that room? You won't believe it.
Trust me.
Derek started stammering. He said my name, Cassandra, like it was a question. Like he couldn't believe I was standing there. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at both of them. This woman was wearing my robe in my bedroom while sitting on my bed. The audacity of it made me want to laugh.
Or cry.
Or scream. But I did none of those things. I just stared. The woman grabbed her clothes from the floor. A designer dress. Louboutin heels. She stood up, and that's when I got a better look at her.
Young.
Confident. The kind of woman who's used to getting what she wants. She started to walk toward me, toward the door, and she had the nerve to smirk. She actually smirked at me. She said, and I'll never forget this, she said, "Maybe if you satisfied your man, he wouldn't need to look elsewhere." Something inside me went cold. Ice cold. I looked at this woman, this child really, and I said, "You know what's funny? I know exactly who you are. Simone Carter. 28 years old. Filed for bankruptcy twice. 3 evictions in the past 5 years. You're not here for love. You're not even here for him. You're here for a meal ticket." Her face went pale. The confidence drained away. She thought she was dealing with some desperate housewife who'd fall apart at the sight of her. She didn't realize she was dealing with a woman who built a billion-dollar company by always being 10 steps ahead. Derek finally found his voice. He stood up and said, "Cassandra, we can work this out. It's not what you think." I turned to look at him. My husband of 15 years. The father of my child. the man I'd trusted with everything. And I said, "Don't. Just don't insult me by trying to explain this away. You brought another woman into my bed. The bed I paid for. In the house I built. While spending my money. There's nothing to work out." Simone started moving faster now. She grabbed her purse, that expensive Hermes Birkin I'd noticed downstairs. She was panicking. She'd realized this wasn't going to end well for her. She looked around the room frantically, and her eyes landed on the window. Our bedroom has French doors that lead to a balcony, but there's also a large window on the side wall that overlooks the pergola. In the summer, Derek and I used to open it to let in the breeze. Simone ran to that window and opened it. She looked down at the pergola below. It's only about a 10-foot drop, and the pergola has a lattice structure that could technically be climbed. She thought she could escape. She looked back at me one more time, and I just stood there, watching, waiting. Derek said, "Cassandra, please. Don't do this. Whatever you're thinking." I pulled out my phone. I said, "I disabled the interior alarms when I came in. But the exterior ones? Those are still active." Simone was already halfway out the window, lowering herself onto the pergola. And that's when I opened the app that controls Duchess and King's kennel. I looked Derek right in the eyes and pressed the button that released them. The dogs burst out of their kennel within seconds. I could hear them barking, loud and aggressive, the way they're trained to bark when there's a threat. Simone must have heard them too, because she froze on the pergola. She looked down and saw two massive dogs circling below, teeth bared, ready to protect their territory. That's when she started screaming. So there I was, sitting in my car 3 blocks from my own house, watching a strange woman drive through my gates like she owned the place. My hands were gripping the steering wheel, so tight my knuckles had gone pale. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to storm in there, to confront them, to let Derek and his little girlfriend know exactly who they were dealing with. But I didn't move. Not yet. See, one thing you learn when you build a billion-dollar company from nothing is that emotion is expensive. Acting on anger, on hurt, on impulse, that's how you lose. And I didn't get to where I am by losing. So I sat there, breathing deeply, forcing my heart rate to slow down, forcing my mind to clear.
I needed to be smart about this.
I needed to be strategic. After about an hour of sitting in that car, replaying every moment of the last 15 years in my head, trying to figure out where I went wrong, I made my decision. I was going in. But I wasn't going in as a heartbroken wife. I was going in as Cassandra Bennett, CEO, a woman who'd faced down hostile boardrooms, aggressive competitors, and institutional racism in the tech industry. A woman who'd never backed down from a fight in her life. I started the car and drove through my own security gates. The guard waved at me, probably confused about why I was coming back when I was supposed to be in New York. I didn't stop to explain. I pulled into the circular driveway and parked right behind that white Range Rover. I wanted her to see my car when she finally decided to leave. I wanted her to know that I knew. I got out and just stood there for a moment, looking up at my house. It's a beautiful property, 12,000 square feet, modern architecture with floor-to-ceiling windows, situated on 5 acres in one of Atlanta's most exclusive neighborhoods. Every brick, every window, every blade of grass on that property was paid for with my money. Money I earned. Money I fought for. And right now, in my bedroom, my husband was disrespecting every sacrifice I'd made to build this life. I walked to the side entrance, the one that leads directly to my home office. Most people don't even know that door exists. It's discreet, hidden behind some landscaping, meant for me to come and go without going through the main house when I'm working late. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. This app controls everything in my house. Every door lock, every camera, every alarm system, every light switch. It's technology my company developed for commercial clients, but I had a custom version installed in my home. Derek knew we had a security system, but he had no idea how sophisticated it was. He had no idea I'd upgraded it 6 months ago. He had no idea that I could see and control everything from my phone. I disabled the main security alerts. The ones that would ping Derek's phone if a door opened. The ones that would let him know someone was in the house. I needed the element of surprise. I needed to see exactly what was happening before they knew I was there. I unlocked the side door and stepped inside. The house was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and something else. Music. Coming from upstairs. From my bedroom. It was R&B, something slow and sensual. The kind of music you don't play in the middle of the day unless you're trying to set a mood. My stomach turned. And then I heard laughter. A woman's laugh. High-pitched, carefree, young. She sounded happy. She sounded comfortable. Like she'd been here before. Like this was routine for her. I closed the door behind me silently and stood in the hallway. My hallway. The walls are decorated with family photos, pictures that tell the story of what I thought was a happy marriage. There's a large photo right in front of me, our wedding picture. Derek and I on the steps of the church, me in my custom Vera Wong gown that cost $40,000, Derek in his Tom Ford tux. We're both smiling, looking at each other like we're the only two people in the world. I remember that day so clearly. I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. I remember my mother crying, not happy tears, but worried tears. I remember her pulling me aside before I walked down the aisle and saying, "Baby, are you sure about this?" And I remember being offended that she'd even ask. Of course I was sure. I loved Derek. He loved me. We were building a life together. I stared at that photo and whispered to myself, 15 years. I gave this man 15 years. 15 years of my life. I was 27 when we met, just starting to see real success with my company. I'm 42 now. 15 years where I could have been focusing solely on my business, on my daughter, on myself. Instead, I'd spent those years trying to build a partnership with a man who clearly didn't value me. I thought about how Derek had changed over the years. When I met him, he was ambitious. He was hungry. He was working 70-hour weeks at his investment banking firm, trying to make partner, talking about his goals and his dreams. He had fire in his eyes. That's what attracted me to him. I thought I'd found someone who matched my drive, my determination. But after we got married, after Kenya was born, after Derek quit his job to support me, that fire went out. At first, it was subtle. He'd sleep in a little later. He'd spend more time at the gym. He'd take longer lunch breaks. He'd planned elaborate vacations that took us away from work for weeks at a time. And I told myself it was fine. He deserved to relax. He was managing our household, taking care of our daughter, supporting my career. He'd earned the right to enjoy the wealth we were building. Except we weren't building wealth. I was building wealth. And Derek was spending it. I remember about 5 years into our marriage, Derek came to me with this business proposal. He wanted to start an investment fund. He said he had connections from his banking days, rich friends who wanted to invest their money, and he could manage their portfolios and make us all rich. He needed seed money. $2 million. He had this whole presentation prepared, charts and projections, and everything. And I listened to him, I really did. But when I started asking questions, real questions about market analysis and risk assessment and contingency plans, he got frustrated. He said I didn't believe in him. He said I was treating him like one of my employees instead of my husband. I told him I wasn't going to invest $2 million in a venture without a solid business plan. I told him if he wanted to start a fund, he needed to do the work, prove the concept, show me real data. He got angry. He accused me of being controlling. He said I was emasculating him by not trusting his business instincts. We fought for weeks about it. Eventually, he dropped the idea. But he never forgave me for saying no. That was the first crack in our marriage. After that, there were others. He wanted to invest in a restaurant. No business plan. He wanted to invest in a tech startup his friend was launching. No due diligence. He wanted to buy a yacht. Just wanted to buy it, no discussion about whether we needed it or could afford to maintain it. And every time I said no, every time I asked him to think it through or show me the numbers, he'd accuse me of not supporting him, of holding him back, of treating him like he was less than me. The truth? I didn't think he was less than me. I just thought he was being irresponsible with money he didn't earn. But I could never say that. Because the moment I said that, the moment I acknowledged that it was my money, not our money, I became the villain. I became the rich wife looking down on her husband. So I kept quiet. I let him spend. I let him live his life. And I buried myself in my work. But I protected myself legally. My mother had made sure of that. Before Derek and I got married, Patty sat me down and said, "Baby, I need you to get a prenup. I know you love him. I know you think you'll be together forever. But you need to protect what you built." I'd resisted at first. A prenup felt like planning for divorce before we'd even gotten married. But Patty was insistent. She said, "You worked too hard to build this company. Don't let love make you stupid." So I hired the best family law attorney in Atlanta, and we drafted an ironclad prenuptial agreement. If Derek and I divorced for any reason, he would receive a one-time settlement of $2 million. That was it. No ongoing alimony. No percentage of my company. No claim to any assets I'd acquired before or during the marriage. Just $2 million, and he'd have to walk away. Derek fought me on it. He said it showed I didn't trust him. He said it was insulting. But I stood firm. I told him if he loved me, if he really wanted to build a life with me, then the prenup shouldn't matter, because we'd never get divorced. Eventually, he signed it. He didn't have a choice. I wasn't going to marry him without it. And now, standing in my hallway, listening to him entertain another woman in our bedroom, I realized something. Derek couldn't divorce me. Because if he divorced me, he'd lose everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, the unlimited credit cards, all of it would disappear. He'd walk away with $2 million, which sounds like a lot until you've been living like a billionaire for 15 years. $2 million wouldn't last him 5 years the way he spends money. He'd have to go back to work. He'd have to downgrade his entire life. He'd have to give up the country clubs and the designer clothes and the exotic vacations. So instead of leaving, he was having his cake and eating it too. He was living off my money while sleeping with other women. And I'd been so busy building my empire that I didn't even notice. I moved through the hallway quietly, my heels barely making a sound on the marble floors. As I got closer to the stairs, I could hear the music more clearly. I could hear their voices. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the tone. Intimate. Familiar. This wasn't their first time. This wasn't some random hookup. This was a relationship. Then I heard it again. That laugh. Light and carefree. And something else hit me. A scent. Perfume. Expensive perfume wafting down from upstairs. Baccarat Rouge 540. I know that scent because I've smelled it on other women at charity galas and business events. It's a signature fragrance among a certain type of woman. The kind who wants everyone to know she can afford a $300 bottle of perfume. I don't wear it. I've never worn it. It's too heavy, too attention-seeking for my taste. But it was in my house. In my hallway. The smell of another woman. I walked into the living room, and that's when I saw more evidence of her presence. 2 champagne glasses on the coffee table. Still half full. The bottle sitting in an ice bucket. Dom Perignon. From my wine cellar. They'd been drinking my champagne, making themselves comfortable in my living room before going upstairs. And there, on my white Italian leather couch, was a purse. A Hermes Birkin bag in a bright red color. Those bags start at $12,000 and go up from there depending on the leather and hardware. This one looked custom. Probably cost $25,000. So this woman, whoever she was, had money. Or, at least, she had access to money. She wasn't some random woman Derek met at a bar. This was someone who ran in certain circles. Someone who knew what she was doing. I felt my hands start to shake. Not from fear. From rage. Pure, white-hot rage. But I forced myself to breathe. Forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't confront them yet. I needed more information. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I walked to my home office and closed the door behind me. This room is my sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a custom mahogany desk, Herman Miller chair, 3 monitors set up for maximum productivity. This is where I do my real work when I'm not at the office. Where I strategize. Where I make the decisions that affect thousands of employees and millions of dollars. I sat down at my desk and pulled up my security system on the main monitor. Like I said, my company specializes in cybersecurity and surveillance systems. The system in my house is state-of-the-art. Cameras in every common area, every entrance, every hallway. Not in the bedrooms or bathrooms, I'm not a monster, but everywhere else. And every bit of footage is stored on a private server that only I have access to. I pulled up the live feed first. I could see the empty living room, the champagne glasses still sitting there. I could see the front entrance, the kitchen, the hallways. Everything was quiet. Then I switched to the recorded footage. I went back 3 months to around the time I first noticed Derek acting strange. And I started watching. The first clip I found was from 11 weeks ago. 2 in the morning. I was in San Francisco for a conference. The front door opens and Derek walks in. He's not alone. There's a woman with him. Long braids, fitted dress, heels. She's laughing at something he said. He's got his arm around her waist. They walk through the foyer, past the living room, and head upstairs. The timestamp shows she doesn't leave until 9 the next morning. I felt sick. I fast-forwarded through more footage. There she was again, 2 weeks later. And again the week after that. Always late at night. Always when I was traveling. Sometimes she'd arrive around 8 or 9 p.m. Sometimes she'd stay until the next afternoon. I watched her make herself at home in my house. I watched her and Derek drinking wine on my patio. I watched her swimming in my pool, wearing a bikini that barely covered anything. I watched her walking through my hallways wearing one of my robes. That's when my hands really started shaking. She was wearing my robe. My silk law perla robe that I bought in Paris 3 years ago. It cost $800. It's this beautiful champagne color with delicate lace trim. I've worn it maybe a dozen times. It's special to me. And this woman was walking around my house wearing it like it belonged to her. I kept watching. In one clip, she and Derek are in the kitchen at midnight. They're cooking together. Laughing. He's feeding her bites of food. She's sitting on my kitchen counter, her legs wrapped around his waist. They look like a couple. They look happy. Happier than Derek and I have looked in years. In another clip, they're in the living room. She's lying on the couch with her head in his lap. He's playing with her hair. They're watching a movie. It's so casual, so domestic. Like they've been doing this for years. I counted the visits. Over 3 months, she'd been to my house at least 15 times that I could see on camera. 15 times. That's more than once a week. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't just an affair. This was a whole separate relationship happening in my house while I was out building my company. I started downloading the clips. Every single one. I saved them to an encrypted drive. I needed evidence. Because whatever was about to happen tonight, I knew this marriage was over. And when it ended, I needed to make sure Derek couldn't claim I was blindsiding him or being unreasonable. I needed proof of what he'd done. My office has soundproofing, so I couldn't hear what was happening upstairs anymore. But I didn't need to hear it. I could see enough on these security feeds. I watched clip after clip of my husband betraying me. And with each video, something inside me hardened. The hurt started to transform into something else. Something colder. Something more focused. I built this house brick by brick with my money, my sweat, my tears. I worked 18-hour days for years to create the kind of wealth that could buy a property like this. I sacrificed time with my daughter. I sacrificed my health. I have stress-induced hypertension now. Did you know that? My doctor told me 2 years ago that I need to slow down, that my blood pressure is dangerously high, that I'm at risk for a heart attack if I don't reduce my stress levels. But I couldn't slow down. I had a company to run. I had employees depending on me. I had clients trusting me with their cybersecurity. I had a family to support. And this is what I get. This is the thanks I get for building this life. My husband bringing another woman into my home, into my bed, drinking my champagne, wearing my clothes. I closed the security footage and sat back in my chair. I needed to think. I needed a plan. Because simply confronting them wasn't enough. I needed Derek to understand that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. I needed him to feel the consequences of his actions. I pulled out my phone. It was almost 11 p.m. now. I sent a text to my mother. "Mama, you awake?" She responded immediately. "Yes, baby. What's wrong?" I could always count on Patty. No matter what time it was, no matter what I needed, she was there. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Cassandra? Baby, what's going on? I whispered into the phone, even though I knew they couldn't hear me from upstairs. Mama, I'm at home. Derek doesn't know I'm here. There's a woman in our bedroom with him right now. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Patty's voice, low and controlled. How do you know? I saw her arrive. I've been watching the security footage. This has been going on for at least 3 months. Maybe longer. Another silence. Then, baby, don't do anything crazy. Think about Kenya. Think about your company. If you do something stupid tonight, it could ruin everything you've built. Mama, I am thinking about Kenya. I'm thinking about what kind of example I'm setting for my daughter. You raised me to be strong. You raised me to never let anyone disrespect me. What kind of mother would I be if I let her father treat me like this, and I did nothing? Patty sighed. I could picture her in her little house on the south side, probably sitting at her kitchen table, probably wearing one of her house dresses, even though it was late. You're right, baby. You're absolutely right.
But you need to be smart about this.
Don't let your anger make you do something you'll regret. Don't give him any ammunition to use against you. I won't, Mama. I promise. I'm going to handle this the right way. Okay, baby. But call me if you need me. I can be there in 30 minutes. I know, Mama. I love you. I love you too, baby. And Cassandra? I'm proud of you. Not for building a billion-dollar company, though that's impressive. I'm proud of you for knowing your worth, for not accepting less than you deserve. I hung up and sat there for a moment, letting her words sink in. She was right. I did know my worth, and my worth was more than this. More than being cheated on in my own home. More than being taken for granted by a man who contributed nothing to our life except drama and expense. I sent another text, this time to Vincent Chen, my attorney. Vincent and I met at a legal conference 10 years ago. He was one of the few Asian American attorneys specializing in corporate law in Atlanta, and we bonded over shared experiences of being minorities in spaces that weren't always welcoming. He'd handled all my business contracts, all my intellectual property issues. He knew my company inside and out. And he knew my personal situation. I'd confided in him a few times over the years about my concerns with Derek. I typed, Vincent, emergency.
I need you on standby.
We'll explain everything tomorrow, but I need to know, how fast can you file divorce papers if I send you everything tonight? I hit send and waited. It was late, but Vincent was a workaholic like me. Sure enough, 2 minutes later my phone buzzed. I can have papers drafted and filed by Monday morning if you get me everything I need tonight. Cassandra, are you okay? I responded, I will be. I'll send you files within the hour. Then I started compiling everything. The security footage. Screenshots of Derek's excessive spending from our bank accounts. Photos I'd taken of that second phone. Documentation of every expensive purchase he'd made in the last 5 years. Every golf club membership. Every designer watch, every luxury car, every first-class vacation. I had receipts for everything. Because I'm a businesswoman. I keep records. Then I sent one more text. This one was to Julian Cross, my business partner. Julian was more than just my business partner. He was my oldest friend. We grew up together on the south side of Chicago. We were in the same advanced placement classes in high school. We both got into MIT. We were the only 2 black students in most of our computer science classes. We studied together, struggled together, succeeded together. When I started Bennett Digital Solutions, Julian was my first hire. He'd been by my side through every challenge, every triumph, every setback. And Julian had never liked Derek. From the moment I introduced him, Julian saw something in Derek that I was too in love to see. After my wedding, Julian pulled me aside and said, Cass, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't trust that man. Watch your back. I'd laughed it off at the time. I thought Julian was just being overprotective, but he'd been right all along. I typed, Julian, you were right about Derek. I need you tomorrow. Can we meet? His response came quickly. I can be at your house in 20 minutes. Are you safe? I smiled despite everything. That was Julian.
Always worried about me.
Always ready to drop everything if I needed him. I'm safe.
Tomorrow is fine.
I have some things to handle tonight first. Thank you for always having my back. He sent back a simple, always. With my team assembled, with my evidence compiled, with my legal strategy forming, I stood up from my desk. It was time for the next phase. I walked to the back door of my house, the one that leads to the backyard and the dog kennel. Duchess and King were waiting for me. The moment I stepped outside, they were at the fence, tails wagging, watching me with those intelligent eyes. These dogs are special to me for so many reasons. I rescued them 3 years ago from one of the worst situations imaginable. There was a dogfighting ring in South Georgia that got raided by police. They found 12 dogs, all Cane Corsos, all bred and trained to fight. Most of them were put down immediately because they were deemed too dangerous, too aggressive, too damaged to rehabilitate. But Duchess and King were young, barely 2 years old. The shelter gave me a call because they knew I had resources and they thought maybe, just maybe, these two could be saved. I went to see them. They were malnourished, covered in scars, terrified of humans. Duchess wouldn't even look at me. King tried to bite the handler. They'd been abused their entire lives. Beaten, starved, forced to fight. Everything they knew about humans told them we were the enemy.
But I saw something in them. A spark.
A will to survive. I took them home that day. I hired a professional dog trainer who specialized in aggressive breeds. We worked with them every single day for a year, teaching them that not all humans are cruel, teaching them that they were safe now, teaching them that our home, our family, our property was theirs to protect. It took time, but they learned. They learned to trust me, to trust Kenya, to trust our staff. They learned the boundaries of our property. They learned who belonged here and who didn't. They transformed from scared, aggressive fighters into loyal, protective guardians. And they're not pets. I need you to understand that. Duchess and King each weigh about 130 pounds. They're pure muscle. They're trained to protect. They know commands in Italian because that's the traditional language for training Cane Corsos. They're gentle with me and Kenya. They let Lawrence, our butler, walk them and feed them. But if someone threatens our home, if someone who isn't supposed to be here enters our property, they will defend it. I walked up to the fence and knelt down. Duchess came over immediately, pressing her massive head against the chain link so I could scratch behind her ears. King sat at attention, watching me, reading my energy. Dogs are intuitive like that. They know when something is wrong. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. The same app that controls the cameras, the alarms, and the locks also controls the dog kennel. I had it designed that way for emergencies. If there was ever a break-in, if someone ever tried to breach our property, I could release Duchess and King from anywhere in the world with just my phone. They'd patrol the property, neutralize the threat, protect what was mine. Tonight, there was a threat. She just happened to have walked through the front door, instead of breaking a window. I looked at Duchess and King and said quietly, "You protect what's mine, right? You protect our home." Duchess's tail wagged. King let out a low bark of acknowledgement. They understood. Not the words, but the energy.
They knew I needed them.
I stood up and took a deep breath. Then I opened the app and found the kennel control. There's a setting for patrol mode. When activated, the dogs are released, and they patrol the perimeter of the property. They don't attack unless provoked, but they warn. They bark. They establish dominance. They make it very clear that this is their territory, and you are not welcome. I hovered my finger over the button. Once I pressed it, there was no going back. Whatever was about to happen would change everything. My marriage would be over. My daughter would grow up in a broken home. My life would never be the same. But then I thought about those security camera clips. I thought about Derek's betrayal. I thought about that woman wearing my robe, drinking my champagne, sleeping in my bed. And I realized my life was already changed. My marriage was already over. I just hadn't admitted it yet. I pressed the button. The kennel door unlocked with a soft click. Duchess and King didn't rush out immediately. They're too well trained for that. They waited for the signal. I gave the command in Italian. Patougliere.
Patrol.
They moved out into the yard, silent and focused. They immediately began circling the property, checking the perimeter, assessing for threats. I watched them for a moment, these beautiful, powerful animals that I'd saved and who would now help me reclaim my dignity. Then I turned and walked back into my house. It was time to go upstairs. It was time to confront my husband and his mistress. It was time to end this chapter of my life and start a new one. As I walked through my hallway, past those wedding photos, past the evidence of 15 years of what I thought was love, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there. The anger was still there. But there was something else now, too.
Clarity. Purpose. Strength.
I'd built a billion-dollar company from nothing. I'd overcome poverty, racism, sexism, every obstacle you could imagine. I'd fought my way to the top of an industry that didn't want me there. And I'd won. This was just another battle. And I don't lose battles. I reached the bottom of the stairs and paused. I could still hear the music from upstairs. Still hear the occasional laugh. They had no idea I was in the house. No idea that their whole world was about to come crashing down. No idea that outside, 2 highly trained guard dogs were now patrolling the property, ready to protect what was mine. I want to ask you something before I continue. Have you ever had a moment where you knew your life was about to change forever? Where you stood at a crossroads and had to choose between staying in a comfortable lie or stepping into an uncomfortable truth? Let me know in the comments, because I'm about to make a choice that will define the rest of my life. And if you're invested in this story, if you want to see how this all plays out, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens when I walk into that bedroom? You won't believe it. I put my hand on the banister and started climbing the stairs. Each step felt heavy with the weight of 15 years of marriage. 15 years of trying to make it work. 15 years of building a life with someone who clearly didn't value it. With each step, I shed a little more of the woman who'd been willing to overlook red flags for the sake of keeping her family together. With each step, I became more of the woman I'd always been at my core.
Strong.
Uncompromising. Worth more than this. I reached the top of the stairs and stood in the hallway. My bedroom door was closed, but I could see the light underneath it. Could hear the music more clearly now. Some slow jam I didn't recognize. The kind of music that makes you want to be close to someone. The kind of music Derek hadn't played for me in years. I walked down the hallway slowly. My heels made soft clicking sounds on the hardwood floor, but the music was loud enough that they probably couldn't hear me approaching. I passed Kenya's room, her door decorated with photos from her time at boarding school, and I thought about my daughter. About how I'd have to explain this to her. About how her view of her father would change forever after tonight. But then I thought about what I'd tell her if she came to me with this same situation. If she told me her husband was cheating on her, bringing another woman into their home, disrespecting everything she'd built. I'd tell her to leave. I'd tell her she deserved better. I'd tell her to never accept less than she was worth. I'd tell her exactly what my mother told me. Know your worth. I reached my bedroom door and put my hand on the handle. This was it. The moment of truth. Whatever happened after I opened this door, there was no going back. My marriage was ending tonight. The life I'd known for 15 years was about to become my past. I took one final deep breath. And then I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The look on their faces was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. I pushed open the bedroom door, and time seemed to stop. Everything went silent. The music was still playing, but I couldn't hear it anymore. All I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Derek was sitting on the edge of our bed. Our bed. The custom king-size bed with the Italian linens that cost $3,000 a set. He was shirtless, wearing just his jeans. And next to him, standing by the nightstand, was her. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Mid to late 20s, smooth brown skin. Long braids that fell past her shoulders, the kind of body that comes from religious gym attendance and probably a surgeon's skilled hands. And she was wearing my robe. My champagne-colored silk La Perla robe with the delicate lace trim. The one I bought in Paris. The one that's special to me. She had it wrapped around her body like it belonged to her. They both froze when they saw me. Derek's mouth literally fell open. His eyes went wide. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Like he couldn't believe I was standing there. And honestly, I couldn't believe I was standing there either. Part of me still couldn't believe this was real. That my husband had actually brought another woman into our bedroom. Derek stood up quickly, almost stumbling. He started stammering, his hands reaching out toward me like he was trying to calm a wild animal. Cassandra, this isn't. I can explain. I just stood there in the doorway, looking at him. Really looking at him. This man I'd been married to for 15 years. This man I'd built a life with. This man who was the father of my child. And I felt nothing. No love. No affection. Not even anger in that moment. Just a cold, empty disappointment. I held up my hand to stop him from talking. My voice came out calm, controlled, ice cold. Don't. Just don't. The woman, she had the audacity to look annoyed. Not embarrassed. Not ashamed. Annoyed. Like I was interrupting something. She started gathering her clothes from the floor. A designer dress, Louboutin heels, expensive lingerie. She was moving slowly, deliberately, like she had all the time in the world. Then she looked at me, and I swear to God, she smirked. This child smirked at me in my own bedroom. And then she opened her mouth and said, in this high-pitched, condescending voice, maybe if you satisfied your man, he wouldn't need to look elsewhere. Let me tell you something. I've been in boardrooms with men who tried to intimidate me. I've had venture capitalists tell me to my face that they don't invest in companies run by Black women. I've had competitors try to steal my clients, my employees, my technology. I've faced racism, sexism, every kind of discrimination you can imagine in the tech industry. And I've never, not once, lost my composure. But hearing this woman, this stranger, this intruder in my home, try to blame me for my husband's infidelity, something clicked. That cold emptiness I'd been feeling transformed into something sharp and focused. I stepped further into the room and looked directly at her. You know what's funny? I know exactly who you are. Her smirk faltered. Just slightly. But I saw it. I continued, my voice steady, Simone Carter. 28 years old. You grew up in College Park. You call yourself a lifestyle influencer, but you have less than 50,000 followers and most of them are bots. You filed for bankruptcy twice. Once at 23, once at 26. You've had 3 evictions in the past 5 years. Your credit score is somewhere in the low 500s. You drive a Range Rover that's leased, not owned, and you're 4 months behind on the payments. The color drained from her face. She looked at Derek, then back at me. How do I know? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because when I found out my husband was cheating on me, I did what I always do. I gathered information. I'm a cybersecurity expert, Simone. Finding information about people is literally what I do for a living. I know your social security number. I know your mother's address. I know about the 3 different men you've tried the same scheme with in the past 2 years. Wealthy older men who you think will take care of you. You're not here for love. You're not even here for him. You're here for a meal ticket. Simone's face had gone completely pale now. Her hands were shaking as she clutched her dress. She looked at Derek again, like she was waiting for him to defend her, to say something. But Derek just stood there, frozen. I turned my attention to him. And you brought another woman into my bed. The bed I paid for. In the house I built. While spending my money. Money I earned. Money I worked 18-hour days to make. While you did what exactly? Played golf? Went to the gym? Spent my money on watches and cars and God knows what else. Derek finally found his voice. Cassandra, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity of it was so absurd. Work this out? Fix this? Derek, you've been bringing this woman into our home for at least 3 months. I've seen the security footage. I know she's been here at least 15 times. She's worn my clothes, swam in my pool, slept in my guest rooms, drank my champagne. And you want to work this out? Simone was moving toward the door now, trying to edge past me. She'd grabbed her purse, that expensive Hermes Birkin, and she was clutching it like a lifeline. But I wasn't blocking her way. I wanted to see what she'd do. I wanted to see how this played out. She made it past me into the hallway, then turned back. She looked at Derek one more time, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was weighing her options. Should she stay and fight for whatever relationship she thought she had with my husband? Or should she cut her losses and run? She chose to run. Simone bolted down the hallway toward the main staircase, her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood floor. But then she stopped. She must have realized that going down the main stairs meant she'd have to go through the entire house, past me, past everything. So she turned around and ran back past my bedroom, toward the guest wing. I followed her slowly. I wasn't in a hurry. Derek stayed in the bedroom, calling after me, "Cassandra, wait, please, let's talk about this." But I ignored him. I wanted to see what Simone would do. She ran into the guest bedroom at the end of the hall. It's one of the larger guest suites, with its own bathroom and a sitting area. And it has a large window that overlooks the side yard. There's a pergola below that window, a wooden structure covered in climbing roses that I'd had built 2 years ago. It's beautiful during the day, very romantic. And technically, if you were desperate enough, you could climb down from the second-floor window onto the pergola and then drop to the ground. It's probably a 10 or 12-foot drop total. I stood in the doorway of the guest room and watched Simone run to that window. She struggled with the lock for a moment, then got it open and pushed the window up. Cool night air rushed in. She looked down at the pergola, then back at me. I leaned against the doorframe, completely calm. "Go ahead." She hesitated. "What?" I said, "Go ahead. Climb out the window. Escape. Run away. That's what you're good at, right? Running from your problems? Running from your debts? Running from consequences." Derek had followed me down the hallway. He was standing behind me now, breathing hard. "Cassandra, please. Don't do this. Whatever you're thinking." I pulled out my phone without taking my eyes off Simone. I held it up so Derek could see the screen. "I disabled the interior alarms when I came into the house. I didn't want you to know I was here. I wanted to see everything for myself. But the exterior alarms?" I smiled. "Those are still active." Simone was halfway out the window now, one leg over the sill, testing the strength of the pergola with her foot. She looked back at me, confused. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. I just watched. She committed fully then, climbing out the window in my silk robe, trying to navigate her way onto the pergola structure. The wood creaked under her weight. She was being careful, moving slowly, trying to find stable footing. And then Duchess and King heard her. The barking started immediately. Loud, aggressive, the kind of barking that makes your blood run cold. It's the bark they were trained to use when there's an intruder, when there's a threat to the property. Simone froze on the pergola, one hand gripping the window frame, one foot searching for the next crossbeam. She looked down and I heard her gasp. Then she started screaming. High-pitched, terrified screaming. I walked calmly to the window and looked down. Duchess and King were directly below the pergola, circling, barking up at Simone. 2 massive Cane Corsos, each weighing over 130 pounds, teeth bared, bodies tense and ready. They weren't attacking. They didn't need to. They were doing exactly what they were trained to do. Protecting the property. Warning the intruder. Simone was clinging to the pergola now, too scared to move up or down. "Call them off. Please. Call them off." I looked at her, this woman who'd been so confident just minutes ago, who'd smirked at me in my own bedroom, who'd insulted me in my own house. And I felt no sympathy. None at all. "Those are my dogs," I said calmly. "I rescued them from a fighting ring 3 years ago. They were abused, starved, trained to kill. I rehabilitated them. Taught them that this property is their home. That this family is their pack. You know what they see when they look at you? An intruder. A threat. Someone who doesn't belong here. Please." Simone was crying now, mascara running down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please call them off." Derek pushed past me, leaning out the window. "Cassandra, this is insane. Call off the dogs." She could fall. I turned to look at my husband. Really look at him. And that's when everything came pouring out. Not from me. From him. I was going to divorce you, Derek said suddenly, the words tumbling out in a rush. I've been planning it for months. I contacted a lawyer. I was going to challenge the prenup. I stared at him. Of all the things I expected him to say, that wasn't it. He kept talking like now that he'd started, he couldn't stop. Simone was part of the plan. I was going to use her as proof that the marriage was over. That I'd been emotionally abandoned because of your work. My lawyer said we could argue that the prenup was signed under duress, that you forced me into it, that I deserve more than $2 million after 15 years of marriage. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You were going to lie. You were going to manipulate the legal system to steal money from me. It's not stealing. Derek's voice rose. I gave up my career for you. I gave up everything. I could have been a partner at my firm by now. I could have been making millions on my own, but I gave it all up to support you. Support me? My voice was deadly quiet. You quit your job because you wanted to. I never asked you to. You're the one who said you were tired of banking. You're the one who said you wanted to manage our household. I supported that decision. I paid for everything. I gave you unlimited access to money I earned. And you think you deserve half of my company because of that. You love your company more than you love me, Derek shouted. You always have. You care more about your business, your success, your reputation than you ever cared about me or our marriage. I built that company so we could have this life. I was shouting now too. All that ice-cold control was cracking. I worked myself to the point of exhaustion so you could play golf at exclusive clubs. So you could drive luxury cars. So you could live in this house. You chose to stop working, Derek.
You chose to be supported by me.
Nobody forced you. My friends mock me. Derek's face was red now, veins standing out on his neck. They call me Mr. Cassandra Bennett. They make jokes about how I'm living off my wife. Do you know what that feels like? Do you know how emasculating that is? And there it was. The real truth. The thing that had been festering under the surface of our marriage for years. Derek wasn't angry that I worked hard. He wasn't angry that I was successful. He was angry that I was more successful than him. He was angry that people knew my name and not his. He was angry that in our relationship, I was the provider, the breadwinner, the one with the power. So, you decided to cheat on me instead of talking to me? My voice was shaking now. You decided to betray me, to bring another woman into our home, to plan to divorce me and steal my money, all because your ego couldn't handle being married to a successful woman? I wanted to feel like a man again. Derek's voice broke. I wanted to feel wanted. Needed. Simone made me feel like I mattered. Like I was more than just your husband. Like I was someone important on my own. I looked at him, this man I'd loved, and I felt nothing but pity. Derek, you were always more than just my husband. You were Kenya's father. You were my partner. You could have been anything you wanted to be. But instead of building your own success, instead of finding your own purpose, you resented mine. And rather than being honest with me about how you felt, rather than going to counseling or having real conversations, you decided to have an affair and plan to rob me. From outside, Simone was still screaming, still clinging to the pergola. The dogs were still barking. It was chaos. But standing there looking at Derek, I felt strangely calm. Because everything was finally clear. This marriage had been over for years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Derek slumped against the wall, all the fight going out of him. What happens now? I pulled out my phone and opened the app that controls the dogs. I gave the command to call them off. Within seconds, the barking stopped. I heard Duchess and King move away from the pergola, their job done. The threat had been neutralized. I looked out the window at Simone. She was still frozen on the pergola, too scared to move. You can climb down now. The dogs won't hurt you. Get in your car and leave. If you ever come near my property again, if you ever contact my husband again, I will press charges for trespassing. And I will make sure everyone in Atlanta knows exactly who you are and what you tried to do. Do you understand? Simone nodded frantically, then carefully made her way down the pergola. She dropped the last few feet to the ground, stumbled, then ran around the side of the house toward the driveway. I heard her car start a minute later, then the sound of tires squealing as she sped away. I turned back to Derek. I filed for divorce 3 days ago. His head snapped up.
What?
3 days ago. When I found her second phone. I've been gathering evidence all week. Security footage, financial records, everything. My attorney has everything he needs. The papers will be served to you on Monday morning. Derek's face went white. Cassandra, please. Don't do this. Think about Kenya. Think about our family. I am thinking about Kenya. I'm thinking about what kind of example I want to set for my daughter. I want her to know that no matter how much you love someone, no matter how much history you have with them, you never accept betrayal. You never accept disrespect. You never accept less than you deserve. I walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at him one more time. You need to pack a bag and leave tonight. The restraining order goes into effect Monday morning, but I'm asking you to leave now. Lawrence will help you pack. You can take your clothes and your personal items. Everything else stays here. This is my home too, Derek said weakly. No, I corrected him. This is my home. I bought it. I paid for it. Your name isn't even on the deed. I made sure of that. Everything in this house belongs to me. I left him standing there in that guest bedroom and walked back down the hallway. My legs felt shaky, but I forced myself to walk steadily. I couldn't let him see me weak. Not now. I went downstairs and found Lawrence in the kitchen. He was standing by the window, looking concerned. He'd obviously heard the commotion. Mrs. Bennett, he said quietly. Is everything all right? No, Lawrence. But it will be. I took a breath. Derek is going to pack a bag and leave tonight. Can you please help him gather his things? Just clothes and personal items. Nothing else. Lawrence nodded. He'd worked for our family for 8 years. He'd seen the slow deterioration of my marriage. He'd probably known about Simone before I did. Of course, Mrs. Bennett. I'm sorry this happened to you. Thank you, Lawrence. I appreciate your loyalty. I walked out to the backyard where Duchess and King were waiting by the door. I let them in, and they immediately came to me, tails wagging, looking for reassurance. I knelt down and hugged them both, burying my face in Duchess's fur. Good dogs, I whispered. Such good dogs. You protected our home.
You protected me.
They'd done exactly what I trained them to do. They'd protected what was mine. And in doing so, they'd helped me reclaim my dignity, my power, my sense of self. I heard Derek's footsteps on the stairs about 20 minutes later. I heard him and Lawrence talking quietly, then the sound of the front door opening and closing. Then silence. I sat in my living room, in the dark, with my dogs at my feet. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. The weight I'd been carrying, the suspicion, the doubt, the pain of being betrayed, all of it was still there. But underneath it was something else. Relief. Freedom. The knowledge that I'd done what needed to be done. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. You okay, baby? I typed back. I will be, Mama.
He's gone.
It's over. Her response came immediately. I'm proud of you.
Get some rest.
Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps. Another text, this one from Julian. Heard from Vincent. Whatever you need, I'm here. I smiled.
My real family.
The people who'd been there from the beginning. The people who loved me not for what I could give them, but for who I was. Before we move on to what happens next, I need to ask you something. Do you think I went too far? Should I have handled this differently? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see how this all ends, if you want to know what happens when someone tries to destroy you and fails, make sure you're subscribed, because the final part of this story will show you exactly why you should never underestimate a woman who built an empire from nothing. I sat there in my living room until the sun started to rise, watching the darkness fade to gray, then to gold, thinking about my life, about the choices I'd made, about the future I was going to build. 15 years of my life were gone, but I was still here, still standing, still strong. And nobody, not Derek, not Simone, not anyone was going to take that away from me. I called off the dogs. That's the first thing I did. Standing at that window, looking at Simone clinging to the pergola like her life depended on it, I pulled out my phone and opened the app. One command in Italian: Riposo.
Rest.
Within seconds, Duchess and King backed away from the pergola. Their barking stopped, and they sat at attention in the yard, waiting for their next instruction. Simone didn't waste any time. The moment the dogs moved away, she scrambled down that pergola so fast I'm surprised she didn't break her neck. She hit the ground running, literally running in my silk robe. Mascara streaked down her face. Whatever dignity she thought she had completely shattered. I watched her disappear around the side of the house, heard her fumbling with her car door, heard that Range Rover engine roar to life, and then the screech of tires as she peeled out of my driveway like the devil himself was chasing her. Good riddance. I turned away from the window and walked back down the hallway toward my bedroom. Derek was still standing there, looking shell-shocked, like he couldn't quite process what had just happened. He looked at me with these desperate eyes, and I could see him trying to calculate his next move, trying to figure out what he could say to fix this, what words he could use to manipulate me into giving him another chance. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to beg, to promise he'd change, to tell me it was all a mistake. All the things cheaters say when they get caught. But before he could get a word out, I heard something that made my heart sing. The doorbell. Derek's head whipped toward the stairs. Who is that? I looked at my watch. 11:45 p.m. Right on time. I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. That would be my attorney. I walked past Derek, down the stairs, with him following close behind, his voice rising in panic. Your attorney? Cassandra, what did you do? What's going on? I didn't answer. I just walked calmly to the front door, Duchess and King padding along beside me. I'd let them in through the back door, and they were sticking close to me now, sensing my emotional state, being the loyal protectors they were trained to be. I opened the door, and there stood Vincent Chen, my attorney, dressed in a suit despite the late hour.
He's always been professional like that.
And standing next to him were two Atlanta police officers, a man and a woman, both looking very official in their uniforms. Vincent gave me a small nod. Mrs. Bennett. Vincent. Thank you for coming so quickly. I stepped back to let them in. Derek had come down the stairs and was standing in the foyer, and when he saw the police officers, his face went pale. Cassandra, what is this? Why are the police here? Vincent reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. He handed it to Derek with the same professional courtesy he'd use in any business transaction. Mr. Bennett, you're being served with divorce papers. Mrs. Bennett filed 3 days ago. The petition was processed this afternoon. I watched Derek's hands shake as he took the envelope. He stared at it like it was a bomb. 3 days ago? But I don't understand. You've known for 3 days. I've known about your affair for a week, I said calmly. I found your second phone. Remember? The one you thought you'd hidden so well in your car? After that, I did what I always do. I gathered information. I built a case. I made sure that when I made my move, it would be final. Vincent continued, pulling out another envelope. Mr. Bennett, you're also being served with a temporary restraining order. Effective immediately. You are not permitted to be within 500 feet of Mrs. Bennett, her place of business, or this property. You need to gather your essential belongings and leave the premises tonight. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He looked at me, then at Vincent, then at the police officers. You can't do this. This is my home. We're married. You can't just kick me out. The female police officer stepped forward. She was calm but firm. Sir, this property is solely in Mrs. Bennett's name. She has the legal right to ask you to leave. You can gather your personal belongings under our supervision, but you need to vacate the premises tonight. This is insane. Derek's voice was rising now, panic setting in. He looked at me with something close to hatred. You planned this? All of this? The dogs, the attorney, the police? You set me up? I stepped closer to him, looked him right in the eyes. No, Derek. I didn't set you up. You did this to yourself. You chose to cheat. You chose to bring another woman into my home. You chose to plot with your lawyer to steal my money. I didn't plan any of that. You did. I just finished it. Cassandra, please. The anger drained out of him, replaced by desperation. 15 years. We've been together for 15 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It meant everything to me, I said quietly. That's why this hurts so much. That's why I spent a week gathering evidence instead of confronting you immediately. Because some part of me kept hoping I was wrong. Kept hoping there was some explanation. But there isn't. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. And then I find out you were planning to divorce me anyway and try to steal my money?
No.
We're done. Vincent cleared his throat. Mr. Bennett, I suggest you cooperate. You have 30 minutes to pack essential items. Clothing, toiletries, personal effects. Everything else remains with Mrs. Bennett as per the prenuptial agreement you signed. The prenup, Derek said bitterly. Of course. Your mother made sure of that, didn't she? Made sure I'd get nothing. She made sure you'd get exactly what you contributed to this marriage. I corrected. Which is nothing. I built this life. I paid for everything. You spent 15 years living off my success while contributing nothing but stress and betrayal. The male police officer gestured toward the stairs. Sir, let's go pack your things. The sooner you cooperate, the easier this will be. Derek looked at me one more time, and I saw him realize that this was really happening. That there was no talking his way out of this. No manipulation that would work. It was over, and he was going to leave with almost nothing. He turned and walked up the stairs, the two police officers following. Vincent stayed with me in the foyer. Are you all right? Vincent asked quietly. I nodded. I am now. Thank you for doing this so quickly. I've been working on this since you sent me those files at 9 p.m. The security footage alone was damning. The financial records showing his excessive spending. The private investigator photos I commissioned for you this week showing him with Miss Carter at various restaurants and hotels. We have everything we need for a clean divorce. And the prenup? Ironclad. I reviewed it again just to be sure. He signed it willingly, with his own attorney present. He was fully informed. Even if he tries to challenge it, which I suspect he will, he won't win. I heard movement upstairs. Drawers opening and closing. Derek's voice, angry and low, saying something to the officers. I didn't care what he was saying. It didn't matter anymore. Lawrence appeared from the kitchen, moving quietly as he always did. He was carrying a silver tray with a cup of tea, my favorite chamomile blend that helps me sleep. He set it on the entry table and looked at me with kind eyes. Mrs. Bennett, he said in his formal way, but his voice was warm. I'm proud of you. Your mother raised you right. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time that night. Not tears of sadness. Tears of gratitude. Because Lawrence had been there for 8 years. He'd seen everything. He'd probably known about Derek's affairs before I did. And he'd stayed loyal to me. Thank you, Lawrence. That means more than you know. He nodded once, then retreated back to the kitchen, giving me privacy. About 20 minutes later, Derek came down the stairs carrying 2 suitcases. That was all he was taking. 2 suitcases of clothes from a 15-year marriage. The police officers followed him, making sure he didn't try to take anything else. Derek stopped at the door and looked at me one last time. I expected him to say something. To apologize, to beg, to threaten. But he didn't. He just looked at me with empty eyes, like he was seeing a stranger. Then he walked out the door into the night. The police officers followed him out, making sure he left the property. Vincent lingered for a moment. Call me if you need anything. Day or night. I'll be monitoring the situation. If he violates the restraining order, if he tries to contact you, let me know immediately. I will. Thank you, Vincent. He nodded and left, closing the door behind him. And then I was alone, standing in my foyer with my 2 dogs, in the house I built, in the life I created. Alone for the first time in 15 years. I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. Duchess and King immediately settled at my feet, their warm bodies pressed against my legs. I picked up the tea Lawrence had made me and took a sip. It was perfect, exactly the right temperature. And then I cried. Not loud, dramatic sobbing. Just quiet tears running down my face while I sat in the dark. Tears for the marriage I thought I had. Tears for the years I'd wasted on someone who didn't value me. Tears for my daughter, who was going to have to deal with her parents' divorce. Tears for the woman I'd been when I married Derek, so hopeful and in love, who had no idea what was coming. But underneath the sadness was something else. Relief. A sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The weight of a failing marriage was gone. The constant wondering if I was enough, if I was doing enough, if I was being a good enough wife, all of that was gone. I didn't have to worry about Derek's mood swings anymore. Didn't have to justify my success or apologize for my ambition. Didn't have to make myself smaller to make him feel bigger. I was free. I sat there for a long time processing everything. And then I remembered something important. Something I'd been dreading, but knew I had to do. I pulled out my phone and looked at the time. It was almost 1 a.m. in Atlanta, which meant it was almost 7 a.m. in Switzerland. Kenya would be waking up soon, getting ready for her classes at boarding school. I needed to call my daughter. I needed to tell her what happened before she heard it from someone else. Before Derek tried to spin the story his way. I took a deep breath and made the call. It rang 4 times, and then I heard her voice, sleepy and confused.
Mom?
Is everything okay? It's really late there. Hi, baby. I know. I'm sorry to call so early, but I need to tell you something important. Something about your dad and me. There was a pause. Then Kenya's voice, suddenly more awake, more alert. You're getting divorced. I was surprised. How did you know? Mom, I'm 14, not stupid. I've seen how you guys are together. How he talks to you. How you don't look happy anymore. I've been expecting this for a while. Tears filled my eyes again. My brilliant, perceptive daughter. I'm sorry, baby. I know this isn't what you wanted. It's not, Kenya said honestly. But I want you to be happy, Mom. And you haven't been happy in a long time. What happened? Did you finally catch him? Catch him?
Cheating.
He's been cheating on you, hasn't he? I was stunned. Kenya, how long have you known? I didn't know for sure, but I suspected. Last summer when I was home, I heard him on the phone late at night. He was talking to someone and it didn't sound like how you talk to a friend. And he's been different. Meaner to you. I figured he was either cheating or planning to leave. My daughter, my smart, observant daughter, had seen what I'd been too busy to see. Or maybe what I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. You're right, I said quietly. Your father has been having an affair. I caught him tonight. With another woman. In our house. Kenya was quiet for a moment. Then, are you okay? I will be. I'm hurt. I'm angry. But I'm also relieved. Because now I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to try to save something that was already broken. Good, Kenya said firmly. You deserve better, Mom. You've always taught me never to let anyone disrespect me. That includes you. You shouldn't accept disrespect from anyone, especially not from Dad. I laughed through my tears. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. I could hear the smile in her voice. Mom, I'm going to be okay. I'm sad that our family is breaking up, but I'm not surprised. And I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. That took courage. Thank you, baby. That means everything to me. We'll talk more this weekend, okay? I just wanted you to hear it from me first. Okay, Mom. I love you. Get some sleep. I love you too, Kenya. So much. I hung up and sat there holding the phone, amazed at my daughter.
She was going to be okay.
We were both going to be okay. I finally went upstairs to bed around 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep in my bedroom, not after what had happened there tonight. So I went to one of the guest rooms, the one at the opposite end of the house from where Simone had climbed out the window. Duchess and King followed me, settling on the floor beside the bed. And eventually, exhausted from the emotional trauma of the day, I fell asleep. The next week was a blur. Vincent handled all the legal proceedings. Derek tried to contact me multiple times, violating the restraining order, so Vincent had his attorney warned that any further contact would result in arrest. Derek hired his own attorney and announced his intention to challenge the prenup, just like I knew he would. But Vincent wasn't worried. The prenup was solid, and we had evidence of Derek's infidelity and his plot to defraud me in the divorce. My mother came to stay with me for a few days. She didn't say, "I told you so," even though she had every right to. She just held me when I cried, made me eat when I didn't wanna, and reminded me of my strength when I felt weak. Julian came by the office every day with coffee, checking on me, making sure I was handling the stress. The company continued to run smoothly. In fact, without the distraction of my failing marriage, I was more focused than I'd been in years. 1 week after that terrible night, I was sitting in my office at Bennett Digital Solutions. It was a beautiful space on the 40th floor of a high-rise in Midtown Atlanta, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. This office represented everything I'd built, every risk I'd taken, every sacrifice I'd made. Julian knocked on my open door, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He'd been doing this every morning for 15 years, ever since we started the company. He was my rock, my constant, the one person who'd been there from the very beginning. "Morning," he said, setting a cup on my desk. "How are you holding up?" I looked up from the financial reports I'd been reviewing and gave him an honest answer. "You know what? I'm angry. I'm hurt. Part of me still can't believe Derek did what he did. But Julian, I'm also free. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe." Julian sat down across from me. He'd aged well, still had that same gentle smile from when we were kids in Chicago. "I'm glad to hear that. You deserve to be happy, Cass. The company stock hit an all-time high yesterday," I said, changing the subject to something more comfortable. "We closed the European expansion deal. Revenue is up 32% from last quarter." "That's because you're focused again," Julian said. "I know this sounds harsh, but that marriage was holding you back. You've been distracted for years, trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Now you can focus on what really matters. The company.
Kenya.
Yourself." He was right. I'd been so consumed with trying to save my marriage, trying to make Derek happy, trying to be enough for him, that I'd neglected my own dreams and ambitions. "I've been thinking about something," I said slowly. "I want to start a foundation. Scholarships for young Black girls interested in STEM fields. Girls like me, from neighborhoods where most people don't make it out. Girls who have the intelligence and the drive but not the resources." Julian's face lit up. "Cass, that's incredible. Have you thought about the structure?" "I want to name it after my mother. The Patricia Washington Foundation. She's the reason I made it out of the South Side.
She's the reason I went to MIT.
She's the reason I never gave up. I want to help other girls have the same opportunities one had." "Your mother would be so proud," Julian said quietly. "How much are you thinking of funding it with?" $50 million to start. We can grow it from there based on demand and impact." Julian whistled. "That's significant. But you have the resources. And it's a tax write-off." "This isn't about taxes," I said firmly. "This is about legacy. I don't want to be remembered just as a woman who built a successful company. I want to be remembered as someone who gave back. Someone who lifted other women up." We spent the next hour discussing the details. How to structure the foundation, what criteria to use for the scholarships, how to partner with schools and universities. It felt good to focus on something positive, something that would create real change. As Julian was leaving, he paused at the door. "By the way, Vincent called me this morning. Derek's attorney is still trying to challenge the prenup, but it's not going well for them. They don't have a legal leg to stand on." I nodded. I'd expected as much. Derek was desperate, grasping at straws, trying to find any way to get more money out of me. But it wasn't going to work. And that woman, Simone? She posted something on Instagram about toxic billionaires and emotional abuse. Didn't name you directly, but it was obviously about you. I smiled grimly. Vincent already sent her a cease and desist. If she continues to defame me publicly, we'll sue her for everything she has. Which, based on my research, isn't much. "You don't mess around," Julian said with a slight laugh. "I didn't get to where I am by being soft," I replied. "People need to understand that there are consequences for their actions." After Julian left, I sat at my desk and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the confrontation, the divorce. And I realized something important. I'd spent 15 years building a life with someone who saw me as an ATM, someone who loved my money more than they loved me, someone who felt entitled to my success without contributing anything. And when I finally stood up for myself, when I finally said enough, he tried to paint me as the villain, as the cold, heartless career woman who cared more about her company than her husband. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was that I'd built something extraordinary. I'd taken an idea and turned it into a billion-dollar company. I'd created jobs for thousands of people. I'd secured the financial future of my daughter and my mother. I'd proven that a black girl from the south side of Chicago could compete with anyone, anywhere, in any industry. And I'd done all of that while also being a wife and a mother, while trying to maintain a marriage to a man who resented my success, while sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of keeping my family together. But I was done sacrificing, done making myself smaller, done apologizing for my ambition. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. I wanted to write down my thoughts while they were fresh, because someday I might need to remember this moment, this feeling of clarity and strength and determination. I typed, "I'm Cassandra Bennett. I'm a mother, a daughter, a CEO, and a woman who knows her worth. I spent 15 years building a life with someone who saw me as an ATM. But I'm not just a bank account. I'm not just a success story. I'm a human being who deserves love, respect, and partnership." I paused, thinking about everything I'd learned. Then I continued typing. If there's one thing I want people to take from my story, it's this. Never let anyone make you feel small in a house you built. Never apologize for your success. Never dim your light to make someone else comfortable. And never, ever accept less than you deserve. I saved the note and looked around my office. At the awards on the walls, the photos of me speaking at conferences, the framed articles about my company. This was my legacy. This was what I'd built. And no one could take it away from me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How you doing, baby?" I smiled and typed back, "I'm good, Mama. Better than I've been in years." She responded immediately, "That's my girl. Proud of you. Always have been." I looked down at my feet where Duchess and King were sleeping. I'd started bringing them to the office with me. They had their own corner with beds and water bowls. They were comfortable here, just like they were comfortable at home. Because wherever I was, that was home for them. "You know what's funny?" I said out loud to my sleeping dogs. "You two figured out Derek was no good long before I did. You never really warmed up to him, did you? But you loved Kenya. You loved my mother. You loved Lawrence. You knew who the real family was." Duchess opened one eye, looked at me, then went back to sleep. King didn't even move. I laughed. "Loyalty is earned. Respect is required. And you too? You knew who deserved to be in that house all along." I turned back to my computer and pulled up the preliminary plans for the Patricia Washington Foundation. I had work to do, a legacy to build, a daughter to raise, a future to create. Derek could keep fighting the prenup if he wanted. Simone could keep posting cryptic messages on Instagram. None of it mattered, because I knew the truth. I knew my worth, and I knew that I'd done the right thing. I'd protected what I built. I'd stood up for myself. I'd set an example for my daughter about what it means to be a strong woman. And I'd proven that you don't have to accept betrayal, disrespect, or manipulation just because you've invested time in a relationship. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept less than you deserve. And that's exactly what I did. I spent the rest of that day working on the foundation, making calls, setting up meetings, planning the future. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt genuinely excited about what was coming next. Not anxious, not burdened, not weighed down by a failing marriage. Just excited. Because my life was my own again. My success was my own. My future was my own. And nobody, absolutely nobody, was going to take that away from me. As the sun began to set over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I stood at my window and looked out at the city I'd made my home. I'd come here 18 years ago with nothing but a dream and a determination to succeed. And I had succeeded, beyond my wildest expectations. Yes, my marriage had failed. Yes, I'd been betrayed by someone I loved. Yes, I was going through a painful divorce. But I was still standing, still strong, still successful.
Still me.
And if I could give any advice to someone going through something similar, it would be this. Your worth is not determined by whether someone chooses to stay or leave. Your value is not measured by someone else's ability to see it. You are not defined by your relationships. You are defined by your character, your strength, your resilience, your ability to stand up for yourself even when it hurts. I built an empire. I raised a daughter. I took care of my mother. I created jobs and opportunities for thousands of people. I changed an entire industry. And I did all of that while also trying to be a good wife to a man who didn't deserve me. But I'm done trying to be enough for people who will never appreciate me. I'm done making excuses for people who don't respect me. I'm done carrying the weight of relationships that should be mutual partnerships. From now on, I'm focused on what matters. My daughter, my company, my legacy, the women I can help through my foundation, the example I can set for other women who are struggling in similar situations. If you've made it this far in my story, if you've listened to everything I've been through, I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my situation? Do you think I handled it right? And if you've ever been through something similar, how did you find the strength to walk away? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories matter to me. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that you deserve better, that you are stronger than you think, that you can survive betrayal and come out the other side even stronger, then please subscribe to this channel. Because there are more stories like this. More lessons to learn. More strength to share. And I want to make sure you don't miss any of them. I'm Cassandra Bennett. I'm a survivor. I'm a fighter. I'm a woman who knows her worth. And I'm just getting started. The sun had fully set now, and the Atlanta skyline was lit up with thousands of lights. Each light represented a person, a family, a story. And somewhere in that city, there was probably another woman going through what I went through. Feeling trapped. Feeling betrayed. Feeling like she couldn't leave because of the time she'd invested or the life she'd built. If that woman is listening to this story, I want her to know something. You can leave. You can start over. You can reclaim your life. It won't be easy. It will hurt. You will cry. You will doubt yourself. But on the other side of that pain is freedom, is peace, is the opportunity to build a life that truly reflects your worth. Don't let anyone make you feel small in a house you built. Don't let anyone take credit for success you earned. Don't let anyone convince you that you're asking for too much when you ask for basic respect and fidelity. You are enough. You have always been enough. And anyone who makes you feel otherwise doesn't deserve a place in your life. I turned away from the window and looked at my dogs, still sleeping peacefully. They'd protected me that night. They'd helped me reclaim my power. And they were still here, loyal as ever, reminding me that real love is unconditional. Real loyalty doesn't waver. Real respect is given freely, not earned through sacrifice and compromise. Come on, you two, I said softly. Let's go home. Duchess and King got up, stretched, and followed me out of the office. As we rode the elevator down to the parking garage, as we drove through the Atlanta streets toward my house, I felt something I hadn't felt in years.
Peace.
My marriage was over. My life had changed dramatically. But I was okay. More than okay. I was free. And that freedom? That was worth everything.